Erling Haaland has been running on fumes this season, while most of City's wide players are young, relatively inexperienced, and lack that killer instinct in front of goal. Omar Marmoush could be the versatile forward to change all that. But where exactly would he fit in? Could we see City field two out-and-out strikers for the first time since 2017? Will Marmoush take a similar role to Julian Alvarez? Or is Guardiola envisioning something entirely different? Grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into Marmoush's unique playstyle, his remarkable output, why that might actually be a double-edged sword, and how he could transform City's attacking structure. Marmoush is neither a traditional striker nor a textbook winger. He's played across the entire forward line for Frankfurt thanks to his versatility, so it's hard to pin him down to an exact position. A second striker or left-sided forward might be the most accurate, but what's much easier to identify is his skill set. Goals are the currency of football, and Marmoush has been a monster for Frankfurt in that regard. With 15 Bundesliga goals this season, second only to Harry Kane, he's been unstoppable. Scoring at that rate across just 17 games is absurd, placing him firmly in the top 5% for non-penalty goals among European forwards. But what is it that makes Marmoush such a lethal finisher? Well, he doesn't just take shots, he gets them off quickly and strikes with terrific power. That's a nightmare combination for any goalkeeper, and has cemented his reputation as one of Europe's most clinical finishers this season. If that weren't enough to terrify defenders, Marmoush is absolutely rapid. City could really use more players willing to make runs in behind, to stretch the opposition's back line and to exploit vacant spaces. Marmoush excels at this, especially on the counter-attack. His intelligent, direct runs would pair beautifully with De Bruyne's transitional abilities and vision. De Bruyne wouldn't just have another runner to target, he'd have one with blistering acceleration. That pace also feeds into Marmoush's high-energy pressing game. Frankfurt's system demands relentless off-ball work, and Marmoush thrives in it. He's excellent at closing down defenders, forcing mistakes, and pouncing on loose touches. His speed is a frightening, multifaceted weapon. As you'd expect, that pace also makes him an elite ball carrier. He ranks in the top 2% across Europe's top 5 leagues for progressive carries, total carrying distance, progressive carries, carries in the final third, and carries into the penalty area. Marmoush doesn't just move the ball forward, he does it with purpose, carving open defenses as he goes. His dribbling is vital to how he approaches his attacks. Before we even touch on the technique, it's worth noting that Marmoush gets fouled consistently as a consequence of his take-ons. That obviously leads to lots of set pieces and free kicks, of which Marmoush is a specialist. He scored 3 free kicks this season, 2 of which came in consecutive matches, and he ranks in the top 2% for shot-creating actions from drawing fouls. He's a very different sort of dribbler to someone like Doku, who's a low-block specialist and can create separation from a 1v1 standing start. Marmoush instead prefers to dribble directly after receiving the ball, often with his back to goal. He'll regularly drop deep, receive the ball under pressure, turn quickly, utilising his brilliant agility and mobility, and speed past his marker. It's this agility and flair that make him a joy to watch, and a nightmare to defend. It's in those central areas where he gets the most joy, leaving midfielders and centre-backs in his wake. Whilst he's in the top 2% of forwards for attempted take-ons, he's not a brilliant 1v1 dribbler out wide, so when he finds himself isolated against a fullback, he's nowhere near as effective. His successful take-on numbers decline when up against right-backs as opposed to defensive midfielders or centre-backs, and his XG numbers following a take-on plummet. When he finds himself in those left-wing areas, realistically he needs someone providing an overlapping option to allow him to more readily drift centrally. When that happens, he's fantastic at carrying the ball, attracting defenders with his gravity, and then it's simply a matter of finding a teammate who's exploited the space Marmoush has created. His ability to drop deep, to assist with build-up is going to be invaluable for a Pep Guardiola side, particularly in games where he'll be required to stand in for Haaland. He loves to occupy tight pockets of space, whilst ensuring his movement within those pockets can't be easily gauged by his markers. He's an incredibly mobile forward and has the confidence to link up with his teammates regardless of opposition pressure. He's much more of a carrier than a passer. For example, his weight of pass could be better, and there are moments where he holds onto the ball for slightly too long before releasing it, but his playmaking is, regardless, fantastic. He's in the top 8% for expected assists and has contributed 9 assists in the Bundesliga this season, more than any other player. He's wonderful at creating from set pieces such as corners, and he's such a clever passer in the final third. He is overperforming from an expected assists and chance creation perspective, so expect those numbers to realign with the mean, but regardless, his playmaking quality is not in dispute. It's largely irrelevant what the situation is. Marmoush is so versatile and is such a brilliant problem solver that he generates shot and goal creating actions from any state. I will say his first touch isn't always brilliant. When all he has to do is flick it onto a teammate without thinking too much, the action tends to be more successful than having to take a great first touch to properly control the ball tightly. He's good at using the already established momentum of a ball, but it gets less consistent when he has to kill that momentum. That leads to some worrying metrics, including being in the bottom 3% of forwards for being dispossessed and the bottom 1% for miscontrols. Now, a lot of that also has to do with the passes Marmoush is receiving. His teammates sometimes don't help him out. And also, Marmoush isn't a typical forward player. He receives more progressive passes in dangerous areas and under pressure than the average striker, but it's definitely an area of his game that could be refined. In those tighter spaces, he's good, but it needs to be a lot better. One of the main reasons as to why Alvarez struggled in similar areas was because of that poor first touch. Pep won't stand for sloppy touches and unneeded turnovers. In addition to link-up play, Marmoush can hold the ball up to an extent, but don't be expecting anything close to a Haaland level of hold-up. Despite being 6 foot tall, Marmoush is outright bad in the air and is the furthest thing from a target man given his lack of physicality. That's just not the sort of player he is. If he's used as a 9, he'd be far more useful as a link-up striker who drops deep and runs in behind. What I really love about Marmoush, however, is his defiance and grit. Whilst he's not particularly strong, he seems unfazed by the prospect of physical battles, and more than makes up for it with his never-say-die attitude and mental fortitude. It's like his mindset is, no, I don't care what you throw at me, I'm progressing this ball no matter what. It doesn't always work out, as we'll explore later in the video, but I think that mindset is an integral facet of his game. What City have in Marmoush is a versatile, clinical and dynamic forward. Couple these traits with his dribbling style, carrying power and ridiculous pace, he's a joy to watch. The way he glides and sprints past opponents with ease is absolute cinema. On the topic of cinema, today's video is sponsored by Valencia Home Theatre Seating, more specifically the Valencia Tuscany Ultimate XL. You'll notice Valencia sent me the XL version of the chair. Maybe they're hinting I need to hit the gym again, but what they were clear on was they wanted an honest review from me. So if this chair's no good, I'm not going to recommend it. I'm in my games room, by the way. Normally I'd sit on that leather-like chair over there when I'm playing Banjo-Kazooie or whatever. But having tested the Tuscany Ultimate XL, this is like when Man City went from Gabriel Jesus to Erling Haaland. Like, the upgrade is ridiculous. Look at what's happening here. Look at it. I've never had a powered recline chair before. Oh, that's so cool. Not being funny, I genuinely reckon I could sleep here. Sleep along confirmed. We will be there. Even with this much recline, it's got a zero wall recline feature, so it means I can have the chair far more flush to the wall. It also has these fancy buttons for powered lumbar, headrest, and you can save profiles. It has these USB A and C ports for charging your phone, and there are 7 RGB LED lighting options. Let's make my favorite color purple. Lovely. The armrests are also lovely. Not for the reason you might think. Storage space. I've been using this for spare controllers for when my very real friends come to visit. They're not imaginary, I promise. But you could use it for anything, I guess. Chargers, remote controls, LNobbins merch. It's actually spacious enough to fit a cat in here. Don't actually put a cat in here. Now, I was nervous Evie was going to ruin this chair, but thankfully the leather, which is officially semi-aniline Italian Napa leather, sounds very posh, is pet friendly. So I don't have to worry about my cat destroying that or the lovely French diamond stitching. My honest review, this feels like an extremely premium chair. It's super comfortable, the XL version has so much space, I think it looks great, and it's my new favourite place to sit in my house. I actually might need to start watching football and scouting players in here. If you're interested in getting one of these yourself, I've put a link to the Tuscany Ultimate XL in the video description. Thank you so much to Valencia Home Theatre Seating for sponsoring the video. Let's get back to it. So that's that. Marmoush is the perfect forward for City. End of story. Right? Wait. Why is there still 5 minutes of runtime left? Well, there are 2 main areas of concern when it comes to the Marmoush transfer. One is Marmoush as a player, which I'm not overly worried about, and the other is how he'll actually fit in at City. And that's where I have a few more questions. So let's tackle that first. This sounds obvious, but here we go. Frankfurt are not Manchester City. While it'd be wrong to label Marmoush as a transitional player, there's no denying he thrives in those kinds of situations. Frankfurt have averaged less than 50% possession in the Bundesliga this season, with plenty of opportunities to counterattack. At City, where possession often exceeds 60% and control is paramount, those transitional moments be far fewer, barring a stylistic change. Likewise, Frankfurt's setup is practically tailor-made for Marmoush. In their 3-5-2 with Ekitike also up front, Marmoush has the ideal strike partner, someone to rotate with, bounce off, and create fluid attacking movements across the front line. This season in the Bundesliga, they both rank within the top 25 for touches in the penalty area, and they both rank absurdly high for shots taken, with Marmoush nearly 20 shots clear of second-placed Harry Kane. That partnership has proven invaluable for Marmoush. The Frankfurt system is designed to play to their strengths, evidenced by Ekitike being the primary beneficiary of Marmoush's creative passes. An offensive relationship with Haaland would look very different. Marmoush is never going to see this level of touches in the box in a City shirt. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing, of course, but it's worth noting that Marmoush isn't going to be the main forward for City. A significant amount of adaptation is going to be needed. There's also the matter of Marmoush's finishing. Compared to the underlying numbers, it's ridiculous. He scored 13 non-penalty goals from an XG of 7.3 in the Bundesliga this season, an overperformance of nearly 6 goals. But this is the first season where he's overperformed. Last season, it was as expected, where he scored 10 league goals from an XG of around 10. But every season before that, he underperformed, and his direct output numbers generally weren't at all impressive before last season. That either points to Marmoush being a bit of a late bloomer, or it points to his current finishing form as being a bit of a one-off and unsustainable. I'm personally not convinced of the latter. I do just think Marmoush has developed his game and has improved his ability to generate XG and subsequently his ability to generate goal-scoring opportunities. I think he'll score plenty of goals at City, but it's worth noting it's unlikely Marmoush continues that ridiculous hot streak in a City side which will never be tailor-made for him. Sticking with goal scoring, there's also the matter of the placement and one-footedness of Marmoush's goals and shots. This data visual represents Marmoush's shots from 2024. This obviously illustrates the almost exclusive use of the right foot whilst shooting. But look at where the majority of his goals are placed. There's an overwhelming favouritism to the keeper's right, usually placed low and across the goal, with very little variety outside of that. That relative predictability could well become an issue, particularly with the inevitable decline in Marmoush's shot volume. That being said, if a player keeps scoring, does it really matter how predictable they are? Knowing what Marmoush will do and actually stopping him are two very different things. A keeper might well anticipate a low, right-footed shot to their right corner, but that doesn't mean they'll stop it, such is the effectiveness of his finishing. What opposition teams can do to stop Marmoush, however, is place him into a situation where a physical battle is involved. As outlined earlier, his first touch isn't always clean, and without the strength to shield the ball, opponents can easily challenge him and regain possession. That could become an issue in games where Marmoush is tasked as the sole striker and is expected to contribute a degree of hold-up and link-up play. So those are the key strengths and weaknesses of Marmoush. One final question remains. What should be his position at City? To maximise Marmoush, you'd probably use him as a second striker. Picture him working off Haaland as Alvarez did at times last season, starting as one of the two strikers off the ball, then dropping slightly behind Haaland when City have possession. This would allow him to operate in Haaland's shadow, taking advantage of the space and gravity Haaland creates. Another option might be starting him on the left, pushing a defender such as Guardiola up to the left wing when City have the ball to enable a false winger system, thereby allowing Marmoush to invert into and occupy central zones. It wouldn't be quite like Foden's inverted role last season, as Marmoush would play more advanced rather than in midfield, but the principle is similar. My suspicion, however, is that while these suggestions would maximise Marmoush individually, they might not be the best fit for the team as a whole. To get Marmoush into the centre outright is to sacrifice a De Bruyne and Foden midfield. I can easily envisage Pep preferring to keep him nominally on the left wing, and instead relying on an overlap from a teammate to prevent Marmoush from being shackled to the touchline. That would provide width, whilst allowing Marmoush to drift centrally naturally. And finally, whilst he's not a true lone striker, he could absolutely give Haaland some rest and play up top, where he'd be more of a link-up hub and willing runner than a target man or hold-up monster. Regardless of where Marmoush plays, he's a brilliant footballer, and I'm convinced he'll flourish at City. Instinctively, the price tag of around €80 million seems to be an overpay, but there's always going to be a premium for players of Marmoush's profile and quality, particularly in the January window. He's exciting to watch, highly effective, has the right mentality, and will undoubtedly make City a more fluid and dynamic attacking unit. When you consider the type of forward City needed, someone better and more versatile than Alvarez, someone to provide experience and output to City's wide options, I struggle to think of a better fit on the market. The only lingering questions are how exactly he'll adapt to City's system and how he'll handle the shift from Frankfurt's style of play. The dynamics in a Pep team are incredibly different, but if any manager can make it work, it's Pep Guardiola. Speaking of Pep, amazingly, some people are still genuinely questioning whether Guardiola deserves his plaudits or whether he's just a fraud. Click here to watch me debunk the Fraudiola myth once and for all.